The 25 Most Amazing Paintings by Edgar Degas. Number 25. The Bellelli Sisters, Giovanna and Giuliana Bellelli. From 1858 to 1860. In the early years of his career, Edgar Degas moved away from the loose lines that would make him famous within Impressionism to develop a more classical and refined style. The Bellelli Sisters is one of the first examples of his mastery of portraiture, a genre that in the 19th century was still fundamental within academic painting. In this work, Degas portrays his cousins Giovanna and Giuliana Bellelli in a sober and elegant environment, characteristic of the European bourgeoisie of the time. The rigidity of the figures and the meticulously balanced composition reveal the influence of the old masters of the Renaissance, whom Degas studied with devotion during his travels to Italy. On a technical level, the work is distinguished by its use of restrained colors and the precision in the modeling of the figures. Every fold of the dress, every gesture, and every expression has been meticulously worked to convey the personality of the Bellelli sisters. The brushwork is more restrained and detailed than in his later works, reflecting the young Degas' attachment to the tradition of formal portraiture. However, even at this early stage, elements can be perceived that anticipate his mature style: the interest in the natural light that bathes the faces, the study of the psychology of the characters, and the subtle tension in the composition. This painting marks a key moment in Degas' artistic evolution. Although he still adhered to academic canons, his interest in capturing the inner life of his models gradually distanced him from official and conventional portraits. The expression of the Bellelli sisters, serene but introspective, suggests an emotional complexity that goes beyond the static and aristocratic pose that is common in this type of work. This sensitivity towards the character of his models will be a constant in his future representations of women, whether they are dancers, dressmakers, or workers. A curious detail is that this painting is part of a series of family portraits that Degas made during his stay in Italy, when he was just beginning to define his style. Despite its apparent formality, the painting conveys a subtle feeling of melancholy, possibly reflecting the Bellelli family context, which in those years was going through internal tensions. Degas, with his keen observation, was able to capture this atmosphere of emotional restraint with a mastery that few artists of his generation possessed. Number 24. Horses in the Prado, 1871. Edgar Degas' fascination with the equestrian world is evident in numerous works throughout his career. Horses in the Meadow is a magnificent example of his ability to capture the energy and elegance of these animals in a natural setting. In the 19th century, horse racing was one of the most popular forms of entertainment among the European aristocracy and bourgeoisie, and Degas found in it a subject rich in dynamism and compositional possibilities. The work, created in 1871, shows several horses in a wide meadow, probably before a race. The arrangement of the riders and saddles suggests a moment of calm before movement, with an atmosphere imbued with expectation. From a technical point of view, Degas achieves a remarkable balance between the spontaneity of the impressionist brushstroke and the rigor of academic drawing. Perspective is crucial in this composition, with diagonal lines guiding the viewer's gaze through the landscape. Light, an essential element in impressionist painting, filters softly between the figures, highlighting the musculature of the horses and the relaxed posture of the riders. Unlike other impressionists who favored diffuse lighting effects, Degas maintained a firm line in the representation of the animals, which reinforces their presence in the scene. Within Degas' artistic repertoire, this work is part of a series of studies on the world of horse racing, a subject that he explored with great dedication. His equestrian paintings combine meticulous observation with an artistic sensitivity that distinguishes him from other painters of the time, The impact of these works on the history of art is undeniable, as they opened new avenues for the representation of movement and the interaction between figures in an open space. An interesting detail is that Degas was not fond of horse racing per se, but of the aesthetics of the equestrian show. His focus was on the anatomy and behavior of the animals, rather than on the excitement of the event. In this sense, his gaze was almost scientific, like that of a meticulous observer who sought to capture the essence of movement without distorting it with the drama of traditional academic painting. Number 23. Dancers practicing at the bar. 1877. By the end of the 19th century, Edgar Degas had established his position as one of the most innovative painters of the Impressionist movement, although he himself rejected this classification. Dancers Practicing at the Bar, 1877, is one of his most iconic works, masterfully capturing the rigorous discipline and private world of ballet, a recurring theme in his work. At a time when academic painting predominated with grandiose and mythological representations, Degas turned his gaze to the everyday, transforming seemingly simple moments into scenes full of life and emotion. His obsession with movement and anatomy led him to closely study the dancers of the Paris Opera, a universe of beauty and demand that he immortalized in multiple works. The composition of this painting is a reflection of his technical mastery. Degas uses an unusual perspective with a slightly elevated angle that immerses the viewer in the dance studio. The distribution of the figures is asymmetrical, creating a natural dynamism, while the dancers' postures show a mix of concentration and exhaustion. Light plays a fundamental role, highlighting the shapes of the bodies and the delicate tutu of the dancers, while warm, earthy tones reinforce the intimate atmosphere. Degas experimented with the pastel technique in this work, a choice that allowed him to more fluidly capture the texture of the dresses and the softness of the environment. Beyond its technical virtuosity, Dancers Practicing at the Bar is a window into the reality of ballet in the 19th century. Degas does not idealize his models, but rather depicts them with an almost documentary precision, showing the hardship of training and the tension in their muscles. Unlike traditional portraits of dancers on stage, here the artist invites us to observe the effort behind the performance. This humanizing perspective marked a before and after in the representation of dance in the history of art. Interestingly, Degas was known for his reserved nature and fascination with the close observation of movement. His interest in ballet did not arise from a love of dance, but from an obsession with anatomy and the body in action. In his old age, his vision deteriorated considerably, leading him to focus even more on pastel and sculpture, always seeking to capture the essence of movement with the same intensity as in this work. Number 22. Ballet Dancers. From 1884 to 1885. During the second half of the 19th century, Edgar Degas established himself as the quintessential painter of dance. Ballet Dancers, 1884 to 1885, is a work that encapsulates his profound study of movement and his unmistakable impressionist style, in which color and composition take on essential importance. Unlike other artists of his time, who focused on large historical or mythological scenes, Degas found in ballet rehearsals an unprecedented field of artistic exploration. During this period, his technique underwent a notable evolution, leaving aside academic detail to delve into a freer and more atmospheric brushstroke. In this painting, Degas shows a group of dancers rehearsing with a gestural ease that highlights the spontaneity of the moment. The composition, marked by diagonals and dynamic lines, conveys a sense of continuous movement, as if the dance did not stop even within the frame of the work. Its vibrant colors, with a predominance of blue and orange tones, create a visual contrast that accentuates the diffuse light of the environment. Using pastels on paper, Degas achieves an almost ethereal texture in which the contours blur and the figures seem to merge with the space. This effect not only accentuates the feeling of transience, but also reinforces the idea that painting captures an ephemeral moment of reality. The most remarkable thing about this work is its ability to convey the essence of ballet without resorting to idealization. Degas moves away from the grandeur of the stage and takes us to a more intimate environment, where the dancers are not perfect figures, but real bodies subjected to the rigor of rehearsal. This almost documentary approach was revolutionary in its time, since dance was usually portrayed from a more glamorous and less realistic perspective. His obsession with the faithful representation of movement led him to study photography and sculpture, disciplines that influenced his way of constructing the space and postures of his models. Degas' work at this stage of his career marked a turning point in modern art. His studies of the figure in motion influenced later generations of artists, from the expressionists to the abstract. Despite his misanthropic character and tendency toward isolation, his legacy lives on in the representation of the human body and dance, where technical precision and emotion are intertwined in an unparalleled way. Number 21. The Orchestra at the Opera. From 1868 to 1869. In the 19th century, the Opera House was the epicenter of cultural life in Paris, a space where music, dance, and high society met in spectacular harmony. The Orchestra at the Opera, 1868 to 1869, is a work that challenges the pictorial conventions of the time by offering an unusual perspective. Instead of focusing on the dancers or the stage, Edgar Degas introduces us to the orchestra pit, giving us a point of view that was rarely shown in traditional painting. This innovative approach not only highlights his compositional talent, but also reflects his interest in the fragmentation of reality, a characteristic that would become key in his artistic evolution. In this painting, Degas breaks with the visual hierarchy typical of academic art. The orchestra occupies most of the canvas, with the musicians portrayed in meticulous realism, each absorbed in their performance. Among them stands out the portrait of his friend Désiré Degas, bassoonist at the Paris Opera, which adds a personal nuance to the work. In the background, the dancers appear barely hinted at, like an ethereal presence that contrasts with the solidity of the musicians. This arrangement creates a cinematic effect, as if Degas had frozen an instant of Parisian nightlife. The lighting in the painting is subtle but effective. The light appears to come from the stage, casting a soft glow over the musicians, while the background is shrouded in a haze of color. This technique, combined with the loose brushwork and tonal variations, gives the work a vibrant and enveloping atmosphere. Although Degas had not yet fully embraced Impressionism at this time, his treatment of color and composition already pointed towards a new way of depicting modernity. With this work, Degas not only pays homage to music and dance, but also redefines the way we observe these spectacles. His fragmented gaze and use of perspective anticipate the explorations that would mark 20th century art, demonstrating that beauty does not always reside in the obvious, but in the details hidden within the movement of life itself. Number 20. Woman in the Bath. 1886. In the 19th century, Impressionist painting was established as an aesthetic revolution that challenged traditional academic principles. Edgar Degas, with his unique perspective, immersed himself in the exploration of everyday life with an almost voyeuristic approach, moving away from grand historical narratives to capture the intimacy of ephemeral moments. In this context, Woman in the Bath, 1886, emerges as a masterpiece that redefines the representation of the female body, stripping it of idealizations to immerse it in the naturalness of domestic routine. With a subdued palette and vibrant brushstrokes, Degas captures the fleeting nature of water sliding down the skin of the protagonist, a moment of vulnerability that in its time challenged the canons of artistic representation. The technique used in this work reflects Degas' obsession with experimenting with pastel, a medium that allowed him to achieve an ethereal, translucent texture. The arrangement of the figure, hunched and seen from an elevated perspective, emphasizes his study of movement and anatomy without resorting to classical rigidity. The soft, enveloping lighting accentuates the intimate character of the scene, while the contrasts between light and shadow add depth to the composition. The fragmented brushwork and the superimposition of layers of color evoke the immediacy of photography, a medium that fascinated the artist and greatly influenced his visual approach. Within Degas' oeuvre, Woman in a Bathtub is part of a series of works dedicated to the representation of female bathing, a recurring theme in his later years. Unlike the sensual vision that predominated in Western art, his women do not pose or seek the viewer's gaze, but are immersed in their own actions, indifferent to the presence of the observer. This approach earned him both admiration and criticism, as some contemporaries considered his approach to be bordering on the invasive, while others celebrated his bold representation of everyday life. This work, along with others from the same series, was exhibited in the 19th century, sparking a profound reflection on the relationship between art and voyeurism. Its seemingly spontaneous composition hides a meticulous study of balance and form, reflecting Degas' tireless quest to capture the essence of human movement. It is said that the artist observed his models without them noticing, studying each gesture with an almost scientific thoroughness. Number 19. The Weight, 1882. In the 19th century, the transformation of urban life in Paris marked a radical change in the way artists conceived their subjects. Edgar Degas, one of the greatest exponents of Impressionism, moved away from traditional representations to focus on scenes that captured the essence of modernity. The Weight, 1882, is one of his most evocative works, where drama and psychological tension prevail over mere visual representation. In this piece, the artist explores the state of anxiety and uncertainty through the body language of his protagonists, who seem trapped in an endless pause, immersed in their thoughts. Degas deploys a palette of muted tones and brushstrokes that suggest latent movement. The arrangement of the characters in the composition guides the viewer's gaze toward the emptiness of the scene, an absence that amplifies the feeling of unease. The rigid posture of one of the figures, in contrast to the slight inclination of the other, creates a dynamic of tension that reinforces the feeling of anticipation. The subtle lighting and enveloping shadows accentuate the introspection of the protagonists, giving them a psychological dimension that goes beyond mere appearance. Throughout his career, Degas demonstrated a particular interest in capturing moments of transition, instance in which the action seems suspended in time. The Weight is a paradigmatic example of this obsession, as no obvious event occurs in it, but the emotional charge suggests an untold story. This narrative approach, based on insinuation rather than direct exposition, sets him apart from his Impressionist contemporaries, who sought to capture the immediacy of light and color with greater spontaneity. Some interpretations of this work suggest that Degas was inspired by scenes of everyday Parisian life, where women often waited for news from their loved ones or moved from one destination to another with resignation. The way in which the artist managed to capture the psychology of his subjects is one of the elements that consolidated his legacy, as his paintings not only show bodies in motion, but also souls trapped in moments of uncertainty. It is said that Degas, obsessed with the perfection of gestures, secretly observed people in cafes and stations, absorbing every nuance of their emotions. Number 18. The Essay. From 1873 to 1878. In the 19th century, dance became a recurring theme in the work of Edgar Degas, who found in ballet an inexhaustible source of inspiration. The Rehearsal, from 1873 to 1878, is one of his most representative paintings, where the movement, discipline, and tension of the ballet world are captured with a unique sensitivity. Unlike his contemporaries, who focused on the grandeur of stage performances, Degas chose to portray the preparation, the moments before perfection, when effort and fatigue become evident. The composition of the work is marked by the asymmetrical arrangement of the characters, a recurring characteristic of the artist's style. The dancers appear dispersed, some concentrating on their movements, others in a relaxed attitude, generating a visual rhythm that evokes the fluidity of dance. The dim lighting and diffuse atmosphere provide a sense of realism that transports the viewer into the rehearsal room. Degas combines oil and pastel techniques to achieve a texture that captures the lightness of the tutus and the solidity of the wooden floor, elements that contrast with each other and reinforce the three-dimensionality of the scene. Within the artist's career, this work represents a turning point in his exploration of ballet, as it was during these years that he consolidated his interest in the study of the body and movement. His dancers are not idealized representations, but human figures subjected to rigorous training, where art and sacrifice are intertwined. The choice to capture moments of preparation instead of moments of scenic glory shows his fascination with discipline, a reflection of his own perfectionism as a painter. Degas is said to have frequented rehearsals at the Paris Opera, where he would watch the dancers for hours, making quick sketches before putting his impressions on canvas. His meticulous study of anatomy and movement allowed him to create scenes that, despite their apparent spontaneity, were carefully composed. This work, as well as being a testament to the artist's talent, offers an intimate glimpse of the sacrifice behind the beauty, a reminder that grace on stage is the result of countless hours of effort. Number 17. Before the Race. From 1882 to 1888. The painting, Before the Race, is a reflection of Edgar Degas' deep interest in the equestrian world, a recurring theme in his artistic production. Painted between 1882 and 1888 AD, this scene captures a moment of tense anticipation before a horse competition, depicting the riders and their mounts in full concentration. In the context of the 19th century, horse racing had become a highly prestigious spectacle within French high society, and Degas, with his innate ability to observe, was able to capture the energy and expectation of these events with a unique perspective. The technique used in this work is emblematic of Degas' style. His loose brushwork and masterful use of color and light allow for a sense of dynamism that contrasts with the apparent stillness of the scene. The artist employs an asymmetrical composition that reinforces the spontaneity of the moment, making viewers feel as if they are witnessing the scene in real time. The precision with which he depicts the horse's musculature and the posture of the riders demonstrates his deep study of movement, something he also applied to his famous depictions of dancers. Within Degas' career, this work is of particular importance because it shows his interest in exploring new forms of visual representation, moving away from academic rigidity and approaching the freshness of Impressionism. However, unlike many of his contemporaries, he preferred to work in his studio from sketches and previous studies, which allowed him to achieve extraordinary meticulousness without losing the vitality of the moment. This technical choice reinforces his position as an innovator within 19th century art, a period marked by the rise of modernism and artistic experimentation. As with many of his works, Before the Race is not just a static image, but a visual narrative that hints at the drama and excitement of the competition. The viewer does not simply observe the horses and riders at rest, but can imagine the burst of energy that is about to occur. This capacity for suggestion is one of Degas' most notable legacies, as with his agile brushstrokes and mastery of composition he managed to capture the essence of movement without needing to depict the action at its climax. Number 16. Two Dancers on the Stage. 1874. The work, Two Dancers on the Stage, made in the year 1874 AD, is one of the most representative pieces of Edgar Degas' artistic legacy. His fascination with dance led him to tirelessly explore the universe of ballet, and this painting is a testament to his ability to capture not only the grace of movement, but also the intimacy and concentration of his models. In the context of the 19th century, ballet was a symbol of elegance and sophistication in Parisian society, but it was also an arduous discipline that demanded extreme dedication from the dancers. Degas not only shows the beauty of dance, but also the effort and discipline behind each performance. Technically, this work is a masterful example of the use of color and light to convey atmosphere. Degas uses warm, vibrant tones to highlight the figures of the dancers against the darker background of the stage, creating a contrasting effect that emphasizes three-dimensionality. His quick, loose brushstrokes lend a sense of movement to the scene, making the viewer perceive the subtlety of the dancer's movement and the immediacy of the moment. The chosen perspective, slightly from above, immerses us in the action as if we were observing the scene from behind the scenes, an innovative approach that breaks with the traditional representation of dance in painting. This work is a key point in Degas' career because it marks his consolidation as the painter of dance par excellence. His obsession with capturing the gestures, poses, and psychology of dancers led him to produce hundreds of studies on the subject, making him an absolute reference within Impressionism. However, Degas differed from other Impressionists in his interest in precise drawing and rigorous compositional structure, which gave him an unmistakable style. Two Dancers on the Stage is not only a work of great visual beauty, but also a detailed study of human movement, revealing the artist's meticulous observation. Beyond aesthetics, the painting offers us a glimpse into the intimacy of ballet, showing us the dancers in a moment of concentration before their performance. This close, almost documentary approach was one of Degas' great innovations, who with his keen perception knew how to transform the everyday into art. Through this work, he not only immortalized the splendor of ballet, but also allowed the viewer to feel the expectation and dedication of those young women who, with tireless discipline, sought to achieve perfection in every step. Number 15. Dancer Tying Her Shoe. From 1880 to 1885. The painting, Dancer Tying Her Shoe, painted between 1880 and 1885 AD, is one of Edgar Degas' most intimate and captivating depictions of the world of ballet. Unlike other works where he portrays the splendor of the stage, here he transports us to a moment of private preparation when the dancer adjusts her costume before going on stage. This seemingly simple moment contains a great emotional and visual charge, as it captures the concentration and daily routine of dancers in the 19th century, a time when the discipline of ballet was extremely demanding and only the most dedicated managed to achieve recognition in the theaters of Paris. From an artistic perspective, this work is a clear example of Degas' mastery of human anatomy and the depiction of movement. The dancer's pose, leaning slightly forward while holding her shoelace, conveys a sense of balance and naturalness. The use of color, with soft pastel tones, and the loose brushstrokes confer an atmosphere of calm and contemplation. The out-of-focus background, typical of many of his works, reinforces the idea that the viewer is observing a fleeting moment, almost as if it were a scene seen in passing. Within Degas' artistic evolution, this work demonstrates his interest in everyday gestures and the expressiveness of bodies at rest. While other Impressionists focused on landscapes or outdoor scenes, he found in ballet studios an inexhaustible source of inspiration. His particular approach, based on unusual angles and close framing, revealed a more human and personal aspect of ballet, moving it away from the grandiloquent spectacle and closer to the reality of the physical effort and dedication of the dancers. This painting, in particular, shows us a facet of dance that was rarely represented at the time, giving it documentary as well as artistic value. Degas, with his unmistakable style, transformed seemingly mundane scenes into works of great depth and meaning. Ballerina tying her shoe is not only a visual testimony of life during ballet rehearsals, but also reflects the meticulousness with which the artist observed and captured every movement. Through this work, Degas invites us to look beyond the stage and appreciate the beauty hidden in the moments before the magic of the show. Number 14. Dancers in Blue, 1890. At the end of the 19th century, a fascination with classical dance became one of the most distinctive hallmarks of Edgar Degas, who, through his brushes, captured the essence of movement, light, and the atmosphere of ballet rehearsals and performances. Dancers in Blue is one of his most representative works, where the combination of cold tones and dynamic brushstrokes frames the elegance and discipline of the dancers. The French painter knew how to endow his scene with a palpable intimacy, showing the young women in full preparation, far from the romantic idealization that usually predominated in academic painting of the time. His close and detailed approach transforms the act of dressing and adjusting the tutus into a moment of art in itself, captured with almost photographic precision. The technique used in this work is a masterful combination of oil and pastel on paper attached to canvas, a resource that Degas frequently used to give a velvety texture to the skin of his models and a vivid light to the fabrics. The composition breaks with traditional symmetry, placing the dancers in different poses and angles that transmit a sensation of continuous movement. The short and vibrant brushstrokes, influenced by Impressionism, managed to capture the transience of light on the bodies and clothing, while the superimposition of layers of color generates an unparalleled three-dimensional sensation. In the context of Degas' career, this work reflects his evolution towards a greater abstraction of movement, moving away from the rigorous academicism of his early training. Despite his association with Impressionism, his approach remained closer to meticulous observation than pure spontaneity. Dancers in Blue is a clear manifestation of his obsession with gesture, tensed muscles, and the discipline underlying the apparent grace of dance. The partial lighting and abrupt cuts of the scene evoke the use of photographic framing, revealing his fascination with the new visual technologies of the time. This work has been widely studied due to the way in which Degas managed to capture the routine and fatigue of the dancers, rather than just exalting their scenic beauty. The artist did not limit himself to the idealized representation of ballet, but explored the dedication and effort behind each performance. In many of his paintings, including this one, the focus is on the bodies in full action, leaving the faces in the background, as if they were mere instruments of his art. The ability to transform an everyday scene into a masterpiece is, without a doubt, one of Degas' great legacies. Number 13. In the Hat Shop, 1882. During the 19th century, Paris became the epicenter of fashion and elegance, where hat shops were authentic temples of refinement. In this context, Edgar Degas created In the Hat Shop, a work that moves away from his iconic depiction of ballet to explore the world of bourgeois women in their interaction with the fashion industry. This painting is a window into everyday Parisian life, where customers immerse themselves in the choice of accessories that define their social status. The scene takes place in an environment illuminated by natural light that filters through the shop, enhancing the variety of textures and colors of the hats on display. Degas manages to capture the essence of luxury commerce with an unusual and bold composition. The tilted perspective and the arrangement of the elements generate a feeling of spontaneity and dynamism, as if the viewer were entering into a real shopping moment. The rapid, overlapping brushstrokes reflect the Impressionist influence on his technique, but also his obsession with close observation. Unlike other artists of his time, Degas does not seek to exalt the female figure from a romantic ideal, but rather portrays it in action, with natural gestures and relaxed postures that reveal a sense of immediacy. In Degas' career, this work represents his interest in the role of women in modern society and their relationship with consumption. While other Impressionist painters focused on scenes of cafes or gardens, he turned his attention to the enclosed spaces where women interacted with the commercial world. The hat shop is not just a place of purchase, but a microcosm that reflects the aspirations, taste, and identity of the Parisian clientele. This sociological and artistic approach gives a special depth to his work. One of the most intriguing aspects of this painting is the way Degas balances detail with ethereal atmosphere. The women's faces are barely sketched, but their gestures and postures are eloquent enough to convey the shopping experience. The combination of blurred lines and vibrant colors gives the scene a sense of constant movement, as if the activity inside the store never stops. This ability to capture the ephemeral with a firm, confident brushstroke established Degas as one of the keenest observers of his time. Number 12. Miss Lala at the Fernando Circus. 1879. Circus performance in the 19th century represented one of the most vibrant and surprising forms of entertainment in Europe. Within this context, Edgar Degas captured an exceptional moment in Miss Lala at the Circus Fernando, a painting that departs from his usual themes to explore the skill, risk, and theatricality of the circus. The protagonist of the work, the acrobat known as Miss Lala, is portrayed in the act, suspended in the air by her teeth, in a display of strength and precision. Degas, with his meticulous eye, not only immortalizes her feat, but also manages to convey the tension and wonder of the spectacle. The perspective chosen by Degas is unconventional and risky, presenting the acrobat from a low angle, which reinforces the feeling of height and danger. The fragmented composition and the use of warm and dark colors contribute to the theatrical atmosphere of the scene. Although Degas was known for his obsession with ballet, in this work he demonstrates his ability to capture the energy and drama of a different performing art. Through diffuse brushstrokes and dim lighting, he accentuates the contrast between the light of the stage and the darkness of the circus. Within his oeuvre, this painting marks a deeper exploration into the study of movement and anatomy in tension. While many of his works on dancers show the grace of the body at rest or in rehearsal, here the artist faces a greater challenge, to represent extreme physical resistance. The work is a clear example of his inclination towards expressive realism, a trait that distinguishes him within Impressionism. It is remarkable how Degas manages to convey the sense of anticipation surrounding Miss Lala's performance. The arrangement of the elements in the painting guides the viewer's gaze directly towards the acrobat, emphasizing her stylized figure in contrast to the surrounding darkness. The combination of technique, framing, and drama make this work one of the most unique in his career, a reminder that art and risk sometimes go hand in hand. Number 11. Ballet rehearsal on the stage. 1874. In the 19th century, Paris was consolidating its position as the epicenter of art and culture in Europe. In this context, Edgar Degas explored the daily life of the city with an innovative approach, capturing fleeting moments with unprecedented dynamism. Ballet Rehearsal on Stage is one of his most emblematic works, where the artist transcends mere representation to delve into the psychology of his characters. The young dancers, dressed in light tutus, seem absorbed in their training, absorbed in a world where grace and discipline converge in every movement. The mastery of color and composition allows the viewer to feel the vibrant atmosphere of the rehearsal, almost as if they were present on the scene. Degas, a master of pastel, achieves a texture that suggests the immediacy of the moment. The artificial light bathes the scene in a soft warmth, casting shadows that reinforce the three-dimensionality of the figures. The oblique perspective and asymmetrical arrangement of the bodies reveal his fascination with Japanese art, an influence that would mark many of his later works. His loose, energetic strokes give the composition an air of spontaneity, but each element has been carefully studied. The master of Impressionist realism, however, moves away from idealism to show the reality of hard work and physical demands behind elegance. Degas' obsession with the world of ballet was not merely aesthetic, it was driven by a deep concern for the human condition. Unlike his Impressionist contemporaries, who sought to capture exterior light, he preferred interiors, where he could analyze gestures and emotions with almost scientific precision. The inclusion of the dance master and the posture of the young women, some exhausted, others focused, confirm his interest in bodily expression as a vehicle for visual narrative. This is not an idyllic portrait of ballet, but a candid look at the routine of its protagonists, who embody both effort and beauty. Far from being a simple ballet scene, this work represents the culmination of Degas' technical and conceptual exploration. Here, the artist not only experiments with light and perspective, but also challenges the pictorial conventions of his time. It is a testament to his ability to transform the everyday into a spectacle of restrained emotion. In his later years, he would remain obsessed with movement and human anatomy, leaving a legacy that profoundly influenced modern art. Number 10. Interior, The Rape. From 1868 to 1869. During the second half of the 19th century, Edgar Degas challenged established norms with a work that was disturbing and charged with psychological tension. Interior, The Rape breaks with the serenity and grace of his ballet scenes to enter a space of conflict and contain drama. The painting presents a closed room, dramatically illuminated by a dim light that accentuates the feeling of claustrophobia. In the center, a woman sits on the edge of the bed, seems to shrink into herself, while a man in the shadows observes her with a rigid and imposing posture. There is no explicit action, but the tension is palpable in every element of the composition. Degas, known for his precision in depicting the human figure, plays here with the psychology of space. The distance between the characters and the fragmented lighting reinforce the feeling of imminent danger. The atmosphere is permeated with a strange stillness, as if the scene were unfolding in a moment of suspension before an inevitable outcome. The elongated shadows and the arrangement of the furniture not only reinforce the realism of the scene, but also contribute to its symbolic charge. Unlike the Impressionists, who sought light and color in nature, Degas opts for an introspective realism, where emotion is conveyed through composition and lighting. This work is an exception in the artist's output, who rarely explored themes of violence or such direct psychological tension. However, it reflects his interest in literature and theater, especially the works of Émile Zola, which explored human emotions with rawness. The painting, far from offering answers, leaves the viewer with more questions than certainties. What is the relationship between the characters? Is it a moment before or after a traumatic event? The title itself suggests a disturbing meaning, but the ambiguity reinforces its impact, making it one of Degas' most enigmatic works. Despite its somber character, this painting is a milestone in the artist's evolution. Its mastery of chiaroscuro and narrative composition place it within the tradition of history painting, but with a modern, cinematic approach. The way Degas constructs space and the relationships between characters anticipates later developments in 20th century art, where the psychology of the scene becomes as important as the painting technique itself. Number 9. Las Plancharas. From 1884 to 1886, the 19th century witnessed a profound social transformation, where industrialization brought with it new work dynamics. Edgar Degas, always attentive to everyday life, dedicated several of his works to the representation of women's work, moving away from the luxury and elegance of high society. The Ironers is an eloquent example of his interest in physical effort and the monotony of manual labor. In this painting, two women appear absorbed in the repetitive task of ironing clothes, with bent bodies and faces marked by fatigue. Degas does not seek to idealize their condition, but to honestly portray the harshness of physical effort. The composition is simple but effective. The inclination of the figures and the arrangement of the objects create a diagonal that reinforces the feeling of accumulated fatigue. The loose brushstrokes and the choice of a warm color palette suggest the stifling atmosphere of the workshop, where the heat and humidity must be unbearable. The scene is devoid of superfluous elements. Everything is at the service of the representation of exhaustion and resignation. It is a portrait of working-class life at a time when few artists were interested in these themes. On a technical level, the work shows Degas' absolute mastery in the representation of the human body in movement. The woman's hunched posture, resting her head on her arm, contrasts with the tension of her partner, still concentrating on the task. Unlike his dancers, whose figures radiate grace and lightness, here the artist emphasizes the heaviness of the flesh and the exhaustion of the muscles. This brutal realism, far from frivolous, reveals his interest in the human condition in its most authentic dimension. More than just a study of work, this painting is a statement about the dignity of effort. Without sentimentality or idealization, Degas manages to capture the grueling routine of these women with a sincerity that few artists of his time dared to show. In an era dominated by images of leisure and opulence, this work stands as a testimony to the other side of modernity, one in which fatigue is the true protagonist. Number 8. At the Races. From 1866 to 1868. During the second half of the 19th century, Paris was undergoing a period of profound change, driven by the modernization of the city and a growing interest in the dynamism of everyday life. Edgar Degas, one of the key figures of Impressionism, masterfully captured the movement and atmosphere of urban events in his work At the Races, painted between 1866 and 1868 AD. A passion for horses and racing was a feature of Parisian high society, and Degas, with his keen observation, captured not only the equestrian competition but also the life and atmosphere surrounding it. The painting offers a vibrant scene in which riders, horses, and spectators merge in a meticulously studied compositional balance, denoting the artist's fascination with photography and capturing the fleeting moment. Technically, the work is distinguished by its innovative use of framing and perspective, with elements placed at unexpected angles. Degas breaks with academic tradition by showing the subjects partially or in dynamic positions, giving the impression of movement and spontaneity. The brushwork is fluid but not diffuse, which allows the detail and structure of the subjects to be maintained without losing the sense of speed that characterizes the scene. The color palette, dominated by earthy tones and delicate nuances, balances the strength of the composition with the visual harmony characteristic of the artist. In this sense, the influence of Japanese prints, which Degas studied with great interest, is evident in the asymmetry of the image and in the arrangement of the figures. This painting is a reflection of Degas' evolution within the Impressionist movement, although the artist never considered himself an Impressionist in the pure sense of the term. Unlike his contemporaries, who preferred the outdoors and natural light as their central themes, Degas focused on structure, composition, and the depiction of form in motion. At the Races is proof of his skill in capturing dynamism without sacrificing solidity of form, which set him apart from other painters of the time. His close study of the human body, the balance of objects, and experimentation with framing were characteristics that accompanied him throughout his career. Beyond its technical aspect, the work also reveals Degas' interest in the psychology of the characters and the relationship between human beings and animals in the racing scene. It is not a simple representation of a sporting event, but an exploration of the tension, speed, and energy contained in each figure. Through a carefully calculated composition and an unconventional perspective, Degas managed to immortalize an instant of Parisian modernity, where the emotion of the spectacle and the fleeting nature of time are captured on canvas with unparalleled precision. Number 7. Place de la Concorde, 1875. In 19th century Paris, the urban transformation driven by Baron Haussmann turned the city into an ideal setting for observing human movement and social interaction. Edgar Degas, always drawn to modern life and everyday scenes, found in the Place de la Concorde a perfect motif to explore the dynamics of the city and its inhabitants. In 1875 AD, the artist painted Place de la Concorde, one of his most enigmatic and technically daring works. In this painting, Degas depicts Viscount Ludovic Napoleon Lepic, accompanied by his daughters and his dog, walking nonchalantly across the wide esplanade. What at first glance appears to be a simple urban scene becomes a masterful study of space, composition, and fragmented visual narration. One of the most striking aspects of the work is the sense of spontaneity and imbalance in the arrangement of the characters. Unlike traditional compositions, Degas leaves large empty areas on the canvas and places the protagonists in a dispersed and asymmetrical manner, challenging the pictorial conventions of the time. The figure of Viscount Lepic, slightly hunched and in the act of walking, conveys a sense of movement that contrasts with the more static posture of his daughters. The dog, located at the lower right corner, reinforces the depth and direction of the scene, while the square extends with an amplified perspective that suggests an open and limitless space. The use of color and light in Place de la Concorde is equally innovative. Unlike other Impressionists, Degas does not indulge in an excessively vibrant palette or diffuse lighting effects. Instead, he employs restrained, nuanced tones that reinforce the sense of naturalness in the scene. The projected shadows and the almost deserted atmosphere of the square contribute to the feeling of solitude and distance between the characters, a trait that has been interpreted as a reflection of the introspective nature of bourgeois society at the time. Degas, with his keen eye and interest in photographic composition, captures a moment that seems trivial but is full of meaning. The painting is a testament to his mastery of the representation of modern space and his ability to transform the everyday into an innovative work of art. Despite the apparent disconnection between the characters, the painting conveys a silent narrative that provides a glimpse of human relationships in the urban context of the 19th century. Number 6. The Tube, 1886. As the 1880s progressed, Edgar Degas intensified his exploration of the female figure in motion, a recurring theme in his work. His fascination with ballet and the world of dance led him to create a series of paintings that capture the energy, discipline, and intimacy of the ballerina's universe. The Pipe, painted in 1886, is one of his most emblematic works within this series, where the artist takes his interest in unusual perspective and fragmented composition to the extreme. In the painting, a ballerina leans over to adjust her costume, while the viewer observes the scene from an unexpected, almost voyeuristic angle. The visual structure of the tube is a reflection of Degas' experimentation with photography and Japanese prints, influences that marked his style in these years. The female figure is cut off by the edge of the canvas, with a frame that emphasizes the inclination of the body and the tension of the gesture. This compositional decision not only generates a sense of immediacy, but also challenges the conventional idea of classical representation, taking the painting towards a more modern and dynamic language. The loose and vibrant brushstrokes add texture and depth, creating a sense of constant movement. In addition to its technical audacity, the tube offers an intimate look at the world of ballerinas, a theme that Degas explored with a mix of admiration and realism. Far from idealizing his subjects, the artist depicted moments of effort, preparation, and concentration, revealing the less glamorous side of dance. The closed composition and unusual perspective accentuate the feeling of closeness, allowing the viewer to observe a private moment within the dancer's grueling routine. This work became a reference point within late Impressionism and anticipated the break with traditional painting that would mark the art of the first decades of the 20th century. The combination of visual experimentation and thematic sensitivity makes the tube a testament to Degas' genius and his ability to reinvent form in each of his creations. Number 5. The Star, 1878. In the context of the 19th century, the world of ballet was a universe of extreme discipline and ethereal beauty, a source of endless fascination for Edgar Degas. The Star, painted in 1878 AD, masterfully encapsulates the essence of spectacle, but also hints at the loneliness that lurks behind the veil of fame. In the painting, a ballerina in full performance shines under the spotlight, the absolute center of the composition. Her delicate, almost weightless pose is captured with a dynamism that conveys the tension and grace of the moment, while in the shadows in the background, a male figure watches with a haunting presence. Technically, the work displays Degas' exceptional mastery of pastel, a medium that allowed him to work quickly and layer colors with unrivaled subtlety. The velvety texture and vibrant chromatic range contribute to the sensation of movement, as if the dancer were in full rotation. The oblique composition and abrupt cut of the scene, influenced by the Japanese art that so fascinated the Impressionists, defy traditional perspective and emphasize the fleeting nature of the moment. Light, in particular, plays a crucial role. It illuminates the dancer with an almost theatrical glow, creating a contrast between her ethereal figure and the surrounding darkness. Within Degas' oeuvre, the Star represents one of his most exquisite interpretations of ballet, a theme he explored obsessively throughout his career. Beyond superficial beauty, the painting suggests a reflection on the sacrifice and vulnerability of dancers, frequently subjected to the critical gaze of patrons and spectators. This work moves away from pure impressionism to embrace a more personal and psychological approach, revealing the artist's interest in compositional structure and the emotion contained in the gestures of the human body. In the history of art, the Star is considered one of the most evocative representations of the world of ballet. The work transcends simple aesthetic admiration and forces us to look beyond the splendor of the stage, towards the reality of the dancers who, despite their ephemeral brilliance, were figures trapped in a rigorous and often relentless existence. Degas, with his incisive gaze, leaves us with an unforgettable image of that duality between glory and solitude. Number 4. The Bellelli Family, 1858. Painted in 1858 AD, the Bellelli Family is a highly ambitious work in Edgar Degas' repertoire. Unlike his iconic depictions of ballet and Parisian life, this painting is an intimate and solemn portrait, reflecting both the classical influences and the innovations that would define his style. The scene depicts the artist's aunt, Laura Bellelli, with her husband Gennaro and their daughters, Giulia and Giovanna. The arrangement of the figures, the rigidity of their postures, and the distant expression of each character suggest a silent tension that charges the composition with drama. The realism with which Degas approaches the portrait is remarkable. Every gesture, every glance, and every distance seem carefully calculated to convey a story of complex family relationships. Laura Bellelli, dressed in black, is the dominant figure in the composition, with an expression of severity and resignation that contrasts with the rigid posture of her husband, who sits in a distant, almost absent attitude. The girls, placed between them, act as a visual link, although their body language suggests that they are also trapped in this atmosphere of emotional coldness. The sober background, devoid of excessive ornamentation, reinforces the feeling of confinement and formality. Technically, Degas demonstrates in this work his mastery of compositional structure and in capturing the psychology of the characters. The influence of the great 17th century masters, such as Diego Velázquez and Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, is evident in the precision of the details and in the use of light to model the faces and clothing. However, there is a modern approach in the way the artist fragments the scene, using unusual angles and cuts that foreshadow his future inclination towards spontaneous and dynamic composition. Within Degas' career, the Bellelli Family is a fundamental piece, as it shows his transition from academic training to a more personal style. The work is not only a family portrait, but also a testimony to the tensions and hidden emotions within a 19th century bourgeois family. With a critical eye and impeccable technical mastery, the artist constructs a scene where emotional distance weighs as much as the presence of each character, making it one of the most intriguing and penetrating representations of his career. Number 3. Absinthe, 1876. In the bohemian atmosphere of the 19th century, where Parisian cafes became the scene of encounters and disagreements, Edgar Degas created in 1876 AD one of his most emblematic and provocative works, La Absinthe. The painting depicts a couple in apparent desolation, sitting at a cafe table, each immersed in their own world. The woman, with a lost gaze and a pale face, seems to be immersed in a deep melancholy, while the man, with an air of resignation, directs his gaze towards an indeterminate point. On the table rests a glass of absinthe, the drink that at that time was a symbol of both inspiration and decadence. The composition is notable for its bold spatial arrangement and use of perspective to create a sense of isolation. The distance between the figures, despite sharing the same table, reinforces the idea of lack of communication. Degas employs asymmetrical framing and abrupt cutting at the edges, techniques inspired by photography and Japanese art, which give the scene a spontaneous and fragmented character. The muted, earthy color palette intensifies the mood of gloom, while the play of light and shadow adds subtle but penetrating drama. Beyond its aesthetic value, La Absinthe is a work of great social and psychological significance. In an era when the modernization of Paris was radically transforming urban life, Degas captures a moment of introspection that reveals the less glamorous side of the city. The painting was the subject of controversy for its crude and unidealized representation of loneliness and boredom, which led some critics of the time to describe it as immoral. However, far from being a simple denunciation, the work offers an uncompromising look at the reality of certain sectors of Parisian society. In the history of art, absinthe stands as a testament to the emotional complexity of human beings. Degas, with his observant approach and technical mastery, manages to convey a moment of life with unparalleled intensity. The painting continues to spark interpretations and debates, confirming its status as one of the most striking and timeless images in modern art. Number 2. The Little Dancer of 14. 1881. In the 19th century, when sculpture was still dominated by heroic and academic models, Edgar Degas broke all conventions with The Little Dancer, aged 14. This three-dimensional work is one of the most innovative pieces of modern art and marked a turning point in the perception of sculpture as an expressive medium. The figure represents a young dancer from the Paris Opera, Marie van Gotham, who served as a model for the artist. At a time when ballerinas were seen both as promising artists and as part of the most vulnerable working class, Degas presented a realistic vision, devoid of idealization and focused on the harshness of the discipline. On a technical level, the sculpture is radically different from its contemporaries. Instead of polished marble or a uniform bronze, Degas used polychrome wax to give it a striking realism. In addition, he incorporated authentic textile elements, such as a fabric tutu and a hair ribbon, blurring the boundaries between sculpture and installation. Her posture, with her chin slightly raised and her chest thrust forward, conveys a mixture of pride and fragility, suggesting the ambivalence of youth caught up in the demanding discipline of ballet. The work was initially met with mixed reactions. Some praised it as a bold depiction of reality, while others considered it almost grotesque due to its unusually truthful character. For Degas, this piece represented the culmination of his interest in movement and the human form in action. Although he was best known for his painting, sculpture allowed him to explore new dimensions of his fascination with dance. The artist's obsession with capturing reality without filters led him to create a work that, despite its modest size, makes an enormous emotional impression on the viewer. It is not just a dancer at rest, but a frozen image of youth, ambition, and sacrifice, where every detail, from the folds of her skirt to the expression on her face, reveals a deeper story. In an interesting anecdote, after Degas' death, the original wax sculpture was cast in bronze in several editions, allowing its impact to transcend the initial material limitations. However, the wax version remains the most valuable, not only for its rarity, but for the fact that it encapsulates the artist's purest vision of humanity and dance. Number 1. The Dance Class. 1874. In the context of the 19th century, when Paris was consolidating itself as the cultural epicenter of Europe, Edgar Degas created the dance class, one of his most emblematic works within Impressionism. The scene captures a ballet rehearsal at the Paris Opera, a place that the artist frequented obsessively in search of inspiration. At this time, dance was considered a refined art form, but also a space of sacrifice and extreme demands for young dancers, who were rigorously supervised by ballet masters. Degas, with his characteristic style of meticulous observer, manages to capture this environment with a naturalness that challenges the traditional academic pose. Technically, the work presents a carefully balanced composition, with a point of view that seems to capture the scene as if the viewer were in a corner of the room, almost like a casual witness. The natural light that filters in from an invisible source illuminates the figures softly, highlighting the contrast between the white tutus and the dark wooden floors. Degas does not seek to idealize the dance, but to show it crudely. Some dancers are in full performance, while others appear relaxed, adjusting their clothing or even scratching their necks with a gesture of weariness. The loose and vibrant brushwork, so characteristic of Impressionism, blends with his interest in precise drawing, lending a subtle realism to each gesture. Within Degas' career, the dance class represents a synthesis of his thematic and technical explorations. Throughout his career, the artist moved away from the typical outdoor scenes of his Impressionist contemporaries and devoted himself to the observation of enclosed spaces, especially those that revealed the daily lives of working women. This painting is a testament to his fascination with dance, an obsession that led him to create multiple variations on the same theme, each with a different approach. His ability to capture movement and spontaneity in a seemingly mundane moment influenced later generations of artists, who found in his work a new way of approaching the representation of the human body in action. One of the most interesting details of the work is the presence of ballet master Jules Perret, whose authoritarian stance and watchful eye serve as the visual axis of the composition. Despite its apparent simplicity, the painting hides multiple layers of meaning, from the tension implicit in the scene to the way Degas plays with the distribution of space to suggest depth. Its genius lies in the way it transforms an everyday rehearsal into an immortal piece of Western art. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.